Hello, you are listening to NPE Stories. This is a podcast where NPEs can share their story. I am your host, Lily, and I found out I was an NPE through an ancestry DNA test that changed my life forever. NPE is a term that stands for Not Parent Expected or Non-Paternal Event. This means that one or more of our parents are not who we believe them to be. NPE Stories is a podcast where NPEs can share their story of what their original family was like, how they found out they were an NPE, and what their journey has been like since the day they found out. And welcome to episode 179. And thank you so much to those of you that are patrons to this podcast. NPE Stories has a Patreon page, and I provide a little bit of behind-the-scenes notes and some video recaps and a little bit of extra information just on what I put into this podcast every week. And there's maybe over a dozen of you that help me out with some wonderful donations. I have some people donating just $5 a month, $10 a month. Thank you so much, you guys, for helping me out with that. I have been doing this podcast for 4.5 years. And it wasn't until about 4 months ago that I started the Patreon page. And it's been very helpful, especially considering my husband was laid off from Google 10 months ago, along with 12,000 other people. And so he's still been out of work for 10 months. And these little subscription fees do add up for websites and recording software and my editing pages. So thank you so much for those of you that donate. Feel free to check out my Patreon page for NPE Stories. I do have a wait list. If you are a brand new listener, I am accepting people to share their story on the podcast. But just a heads up, the wait list is over 50 people long. And to be fair, I go in the order of emails received. So it might be a year before I get in touch with you. And I have been lately responding to people a year later, and I think they have changed their email addresses or their inboxes are full. So make sure that if you are on the wait list and you change your email address or your inbox is full, just know that I am trying to reach you. It might be a year before I get in touch with you. But you do still keep your spot on the wait list. So those of you that have been waiting over a year, make sure your inbox is not full because I am trying to reach you. Okay, and so today we are going to get into listening to an NPE story. And I have on Caroline. Hi, Caroline.
Hi, Lily. It's nice to be here.
Thank you for doing this. I heard you have done this before. You've been on other podcasts, right?
Yes, I've made the rounds with DNA Surprises with Alexis and Everything's Relative with Eve Sturgis.
How did that go for you, sharing your story?
The first time with Alexis, I was only a couple months out from my DNA surprise, so it was very raw and emotional and hard to talk about. When I was on Eve's podcast, it had been a while. I feel like I'd grown a little stronger. I think it had been about a year, and I had a different view, not so raw, not so shameful that somehow I did something wrong. I was able to just see it in a different light after some time had gone by. And then I still wanted to be on your podcast because some things have happened medically that I wanted to share with your listeners about how important having the correct medical information is.
Yes, you have had some really important medical information, brand new developments. And I'm so sorry what you're going through. Do you want to start off by sharing what happened?
I will. I found out in July 2022 that my bio father was not the father who raised me. And before that, when I was 40 years old in 2004, I had been diagnosed with breast cancer, and it was not a hormone-related cancer. It was an aggressive cancer, what they call HER2/neu, and I was young to have that. I went through treatment. I went through 2 lumpectomies, radiation, and 1 year of chemo because I was in a clinical trial because of the type of cancer. And my oncologist at the time said, "Hey, I think we're looking at a cure here. You're good." And she told me I didn't need to check in anymore. So great, fabulous. 19 years later, which was September of this year, I still went for my annual screenings, which is super important no matter how long you have cancer free. And it turned out that I had a new primary breast cancer, not a recurrence of the old cancer, but a different cancer, which is also extremely aggressive. And went back to the same oncologist, and she said, "I'm very concerned that you carry one of the genes. And are you sure you do not have this in your medical history?" Because at the time when I was 40, I was offered genetic testing, but because the man who raised me, there was not breast cancer on his side that I could find. I asked my mother. There was not, my mom did not have breast cancer. My grandma did not have breast cancer. So there wasn't a link close for breast cancer. So I denied the genetic testing. But going to the oncologist this time, she said, "I believe that the type you have, you're having breast cancer at a young age, you're having a second primary breast cancer. I think that there has to be some genetic link." So I told her that last year in July, I had found out my biofather was not the father who raised me. I had not known. Everyone had passed away. I had, when I first found out, reached out to a second cousin, and he said there was breast cancer, and my grandma would have been my new bio grandmother's line, and that his mother had died of breast cancer, and I believe one of her sisters or daughters. So I passed that along to my oncologist. So we're definitely doing the genetic test because I have children and my children have children, and I would really like to know. And as far as my treatment options, because I've already had radiation, you must have a mastectomy because they cannot radiate twice on the same spot, and there's some serious consequences for that. But I believe I'm going to have a double mastectomy just because we think the gene is there. And either way, I still want to not have that breast, even though they do say lumpectomies have the same survival rate. I'm just going to go for the double mastectomy, which will be life changing. I will be a flat woman.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to have reconstruction. And the reason I think this is so important to get out to the community because I'm 59 years old and I only found out last year. And like I said, there are regrets, but I wish at the time my mother was still alive on my first breast cancer diagnosis. And I asked her several times. And granted, we have a lot better technology. I don't think that there were gene tests back then that she was aware of, genetic tests, but it would have been a really good time for her to tell me. I believe that she knew the father that raised me was not my biological father because when I asked her years later why she had divorced him, she said he was impotent. And my dad that raised me was on his 10th marriage at the time that he died of a heart attack. And there were no other children except for a possibility when he was in the service, which now, if he truly was impotent, I don't believe was even his child.
Mm.
But that would have been a really good time to let me know that she wasn't, she could have just said, "I don't know, I'm not sure," and take all the precautions that I could have taken at that time. But I believe that she knew. And I also uncovered after my NPE, I ordered my brother's birth certificate. He died of AIDS in 1990, but they weren't married until 6 weeks after my brother was born. So I don't even know if my brother was the dad who raised me's child. And I think he always questioned it. and he was severely abusive to my brother physically, beat him often, and my brother was gay, and my dad who raised me could not accept that, but he left when I was 7, and then she
Oh,
immediately brought in a new man who was sexually and abusive, emotionally abusive to me, and physically abusive to my brother.
oh. I have some questions. So, this is a lot, Caroline. So, when you first found out you had breast cancer 19 years ago, I am so sorry about your reoccurrence with this new breast cancer this new diagnosis you just received. It sounds like not only would you have gotten genetic testing, but my question is, would you have had a double mastectomy at that time had you known your true medical history?
Yes, because that, like you see in the news, like Angelina Jolie carries that gene. And I just remember when she had a double mastectomy because she knew that she was very likely to get breast or ovarian cancer. So she took control and had a double mastectomy so she would not get either. I don't remember if she had a hysterectomy too, but she
Yeah.
was able to take
Yes.
steps so she did not get cancer, did not have to go through the whole process and possibly die depending on when you're diagnosed. But definitely, I'm trying to think. I am almost 100% positive that the gene testing was available in 2004. And
Yeah.
if I had any clue that my dad wasn't my dad and that wasn't my medical history, or if my mom would have told me and I could have reached out. My bio dad was passed on in 2004, but I could have done the same thing I have done now, which is reach out. I don't know how it would have worked, Lily. My mom would have had to tell me because I did not, the half brother did not show up in my DNA relatives until 2018. I didn't recognize it. I didn't look at my matches. I was just looking at the ancestry. So I didn't realize
Mm.
until 2022 when I retired that all these matches weren't my bio or my dad that raised me. They were just, and I recognized the name of the sheriff. I was like, why is this guy showing 25% related to me? But it wasn't him, it was his son. They have the same name. And so that was a half sibling, and I knew that name.
Oh. Let me get your original raising family straight. I think I have it straight, but it sounds like it was your mom, your birth certificate father, and your brother, who I'm sorry you said passed of AIDS in the 90s, correct?
Right. In 1990, he
In
was one of the first um, to be sent to Bethesda, Maryland for the clinical trials for AZT
mm,
because he was diagnosed so early. They thought at first he had Hodgkin's lymphoma, but it turned out to be HIV.
uh, what was your life like growing up with this family?
I did not have a good childhood. I took out some pictures because I wasn't sure if we were going to be on video. I'll probably still send them to you,
Yes, please
but
send them. I'll put them in.
my dad was 100% Italian. There were some mafia ties back in Las Vegas back in the day. He changed his name because his name was Salvatore Vincenzo Iannoni. And when he went to work, his brother was extremely involved in the mob and changed his name to Danny Wilson. If you look him up, he's in like the Mobster Museum. He was a bad guy. So my dad changed his name to Sonny Wilson, and they went by Wilson. So when I was born, I was a Wilson with no connection to that name whatsoever. That was just a name they pulled out of a hat. So I already had identity issues. But in all the pictures I look while my dad was there, I have three I'm looking at. In every picture, he's looking at me instead of the camera and smiling. I was like the apple of his eye, his little Caroline. But my brother, he was extremely abusive. I remember going in and telling him one time that my brother wouldn't let me play with the Legos and my dad worked nights and he was asleep during the day, and he literally grabbed a ski pole and beat my brother until there was, I could see the blood going on the
Oh,
wall. It was terrible, so I learned not to tell. But he left when I was 7, and it seems to me like literally the next day I saw a man's pair of shoes when I got up in our living room that I knew weren't my dad's, and that my mom had moved the stepfather in. So, and from then on, it was just sexual abuse and abuse. And even when I told my mother, she wouldn't believe me. And it went on from about the time I was 7 until 15 when I got my first boyfriend. And I called my boyfriend, and he came over and threatened my stepfather. And he just told my mom that we were all on drugs and it never happened. And
oh my
so the
God.
day my mom died, even when I would bring it up, she'd just say, "Oh, well, what do you want me to do? Be alone?" And
Oh,
things like that. So it was very toxic,
what was your mom like?
selfish,
Yes.
abusive.
Yes.
She loved and doted on my brother. They were very close until he died. She even went with him to Maryland when he was getting his AZT treatments. And I remember one time I had finally put my foot down because family trauma and trauma bonding, she would visit me with my children. And I finally told her, "You cannot bring him around my children anymore." I still don't know, Lily, if he ever touched my daughter, but I allowed him to spend the night in our home with my daughter in the home, which I still beat myself up for. So then we went on no contact. And she told me at that time, "I wish if one of my children had died, it would have been you." Um,
Oh my goodness.
and yeah, and it's like whether she meant it or not, it was very hurtful, even though I love my brother dearly. Growing up, I knew I looked different because I was supposed to be three-quarters Italian
Mm-hmm.
because my mom was half Italian and I'm very fair and I had red in my hair. People would say, "You don't look Italian," like next to my dad. But I had never thought about it, just a lot of grief and sadness that my dad had gone, as being molested. My brother was still being physically abused. And I didn't tell and for a long time. And then my teen years, just getting into trouble. I got sent to juvenile hall for running away, just trying to get out of that environment. But a funny part to that is I did find out, bio father was a 3-term sheriff. He had been a police officer for 47 years before he died. I became a police officer, and I also went into the Marines to get away from the toxic environment. And my bio dad had been a Marine in World War II and Guadalcanal. So I just thought it was interesting that I did follow the same path because when in my family, my dad that raised me had an eighth grade education and just grew up mobster like with the Italians, and the bio dad was college and very different.
How did you find out who your birth father was?
I went Okay, so in 2015 I took the ancestry test with my daughter and her husband, my granddaughter, my son. We all did it because I had thought, well, on my mom's side, they always said there was, that Native American Cherokee princess in there. And I've always loved everything Native, but, there's that price. They did not have a romanticized life. It was very ugly. But I did want to look on my grandma's side because my maternal grandmother was not Italian, just my maternal grandfather. So I began searching, and at that time, 2015, all it said was that I was like 90 something percent Western European. So it checked out, never looked at matches. Then in 2018, I got back on and I wanted to start working on it again because I had more time. And I saw the match. I hadn't looked at the DNA matches, and Ancestry had updated their regions, but it was still the same region as where my dad came from, which was Italy. It still just showed Western European and Italy, which my mom has Italy as well. It's Northern Italy, but it didn't divide them at the time. And then I did look at the matches because I said, well, I want to see if my cousins are on here. They're all in New York. They're all full-blooded Italian. And I couldn't find any. And in fact, the only Italian name I could find was on my mom's side, and they're all Northern Italian, so they are lighter. They have green eyes, and they came from Somio, Switzerland, but they were still Italian. It was all right there, but I couldn't find any of my dad's names. But I found all these weird, not weird, but names that shouldn't have been on. I thought, well, they must be related to my grandma because she was a Clark and a Jones. And then at the top of the list was the John Moran at 25%. And I was like, well, that's weird. And I sent an email to him. It said he hadn't been on in over a year. Then I found a second cousin and reached out to him and said, I think I had reached out to him first and said, hey, how do I know you? Are you related? And I gave him my mom's side. And he said, no, I don't see anything like that. And we were like, oh, well. And so I just kind of moved on because it wasn't clicking yet.
Yeah.
And then in 2022, I retired and got back on. The John Moran guy was still there. The cousin was still there. John Moran had not signed in, but there was a new match with a Vegas handle. And I was like, well, that's weird. And then I reached out to that same cousin who is 80. He's the one whose mother died of breast cancer. He said, let me look. He said, I'm going to take a minute and look. And then he came back and he said, what about Moran? And I said, well, the only Moran I know, which is funny, Lily, my husband's first wife was Moran, but I was like, no, that's far out there.
Hmm.
And then I was like, the sheriff, I said, there was a sheriff, John Moran. And he goes, yeah, that was my first cousin. I met him. He was the sheriff of Las Vegas. He said, let me do some looking. Then I reached out to the Vegas handle, and he was really rude at first and said, I don't need this bullshit. Like, what are you doing? And my dad was our hero, and he would have never stepped out on my mom, and da 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 da. Then we got to talking, and they had a big connection to the Stardust Casino. My half brother married the daughter of the man who ran the Stardust Casino, and my mom worked at the Stardust Casino. And I always wondered how she got that job because those jobs are hard to get. But it turned out in April of 1963, they must have hooked up or had an affair. And then I was born in January of 1964. My mom was married to my dad at the time for at least for 8 years. And he had been married 18 years to his wife. And I got a little, that's how I found out, because then the cousin got back and said, I'm looking at this and it's between him and his brother, but his brother has no connection to Las Vegas. And then when I talked to the brother longer, looked at the half niece, we determined that, yeah, we were half siblings. And that's when I started we took a few more tests. We went on GEDmatch. We went on 23andMe. Everything matched up for half siblings. And then that's when he told me, don't ever contact my brother. And he was just kind of keeping me at bay, I think, so I wouldn't contact anyone else. But then I got a DNA angel, and she confirmed that John Moran was the bio father.
How did it feel when you realized that this Moran was your half brother? When you figured that out, how did you feel?
Well, at first, I was excited because I think I went to child mode because I was like, oh my gosh, I do have two half brothers now. I have a niece. I have all these people that could be my family. And then it was kind of weird, Lily, because even a couple of people in my family were like, I don't know, it's kind of weird. Like, he love bombed me big time, the half brother. And started telling me he loved me, and but it was kind of weird, and he sent me pictures of himself, and but I kept asking him if I could have pictures of my bio dad, or if he would tell me about my bio dad, any stories, and he wouldn't do it. He just, and so I said, "Will you at least call me?" And he called me, and all he did was talk about his, he was having a colonoscopy that day, and like he would never answer any questions about my bio dad. And then
Hmm.
he finally just sent me a picture that I could have got on the internet of my
Yeah.
bio dad.
Yeah.
But I have since went to the UNLV archives and got tons of pictures and articles and found out everything about my bio dad, and even
Mm.
talked to one of his friends that said he was a big teddy bear and everybody just loved him. But the half brother just turned and got nasty as soon as I talked about changing my name to my dad's name.
Your half brother initially was receptive and you were talking. And
Yeah.
then, as soon as you start mentioning changing your name or asking more about your birth father, that's when he changed. That's when you felt this change.
Yeah, we were emailing, and I said, "What do you think about this? I could change my name, and if you would take test, because you have to take it legally through a different site to make it a legal match. I
Hmm.
forget what the company's name is, but they send it out to, and then I could have used that and petitioned Nevada to change my birth certificate."
Hmm.
And he said, "No, that's a horrible idea. I don't like that idea. It's gone. Your dad is still your dad that raised you. My dad is not your dad." And I'm like, "Well, biologically he is. And
Yeah.
I would like that to be in historical record that that's my dad, because Sonny Wilson, not only is the name not correct, there's no connection to me and him."
Yeah.
And then he got nasty. And then I had stalked him on Facebook, but I never reached out to add him because he was really clear that he didn't want anybody to know we were talking.
He
So
wants to keep you a secret.
he wanted to keep it a secret. He didn't want anyone to know we were talking. So I saw that he blocked me on Facebook, and I was like, "Okay, whatever, dude, because I'm not going to contact you again after the way you treated me." And then I wrote a letter to John Moran Jr. He said not to contact him. I wrote it to his wife, and John Moran Jr. is an attorney, so I didn't want to get a cease and desist. So I wrote to his wife and then never heard back. Tried to contact ex wives of the half brother that I was talking to. Nobody, not one person would even acknowledge me, even though I saw that they saw. And that's what makes me so upset, because I'm not positive, but I did reach a lady. So it would be my first cousin that's a female. So my bio dad's brother's daughter, I kind of, just from vibes I got, think she might have had cancer, but they just said she's been through enough, like, please leave us alone. So I reached out to her on Ancestry and said, "Hey, would you please just give me a medical history? If you don't want to talk to me, that's okay. If I don't hear back from you, I won't reach out again." And I saw that she read it and she never responded.
Have you received any of your medical history then?
Only from my 80-year-old second cousin
Oh.
that said his mother died of breast cancer. And then I did order both my grandma and my grandfather's death certificates. I was able to order them. I put that I was a grandchild. My grandma died of female cancer, which had metastasized. It wasn't of the breast, it would be HPV today. My grandpa died of heart, but my bio dad died of lung cancer, but which I was able to find out when I had talked to the half brother. He said he smoked, his whole life.
Mm.
So I don't know if it's connected, but nobody directly from the family would give me any medical history. And because of my situation, and I will follow up with you just so you know if I do have that gene. I'm pretty sure I probably do based on what my oncologist said and the history. There were no girls in my bio dad's family, although men can get breast cancer.
Mm.
Uh, but I do highly suspect, and I don't know why, just the way that lady talked to me was my bio dad's brother's wife said something like, she's been through enough and please don't contact her. And then I reached out to one of her sons and he said the same thing. If she wanted to talk to you, she would.
Wow.
And so it was really hurtful. But now,
Yes.
since this new diagnosis, like, it was hurtful then because I the medical history, I thought it's still important, but now it's so more important than ever. But my doctor said, Caroline, I have a lot of adopted patients, so you just do the genetic testing, you do the things that you need to do that adoptees do, because you don't know. And
That's true. Adoptees oftentimes don't know their medical history as
right,
well,
either side.
right?
So that's where I'm at now. But I just thought it was really important to get out the fact that I could have made much different choices, and I would have made different choices. Like, if I knew I had the gene, or suspected it could be, because my dad wasn't my dad, I would have had genetic testing then, and
Yeah.
I would have gone full mastectomy. And, my daughter's coming up on the age that I got my first cancer. And
Mm.
so it's very scary.
Yes.
So that's what I really wanted to get out today on
Yeah.
your show, that it's really important. And if you can't get it from the people closest, like, get the death certificates, do what you can, reach out to second cousins, because that man has not only did he help me find out who my bio dad was, he did that on his own. He narrowed it down for me. It has to be either these two guys. And he let me know that his mom had died of breast cancer.
I've learned so much just in the last few minutes. I've heard you talk about getting death certificates. I didn't even remember that that was something that you could do to get the cause of death, especially if family members aren't forthcoming with information.
Yes, and Lily, I had to fill out a form,
Mhm.
and I had to say under penalty of perjury that I was a grandchild and I have the DNA.
Yes.
So I signed it, and I was able to get my grandfather's. I got my brother's, which that I already knew, but for people that if they just found out they have a new sibling. And, I got my grandma's. And then I also, Lily, this is one thing I want to share. I just found it so synchronistic that, so my mother-in-law passed away this June, and we went down to Modesto, and that's where we had the funeral and we had her burial. And then I went on to I searched everything on my grandma and grandpa and found out that they were in Modesto and they had run a diner, and my grandma and grandpa are buried not even that far in the same cemetery as my mother and father-in-law. And I can go to their graves and see where they are. And I thought, what a chance in a million of growing up in Las Vegas, and I'm not from this area, and that's where my grandparents are buried, right there.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, kind of just, I just couldn't believe that they were there, and I was so many feet from them, and I didn't know at the time that they were in that same cemetery.
You mentioned earlier a resource that I wanted to add in the notes. You said you ended up finding out a lot of information from, I believe it was a website where you got a lot of pictures or articles, was it? Do you
Oh,
remember the
yeah.
name? What's that
News
called?
It's newspapers.com. And I got so much, but then I went to the archives of University Nevada, Las Vegas archives. So because my bio dad was so much in the political realm, I got everything. I got video of his funeral that was broadcast in Las Vegas live. So I got to see pictures and video of that. I got
Unbelievable.
pictures of him when he was older, which I got the genetic mirroring because I can so see myself in him. So these were portraits that were taken of him in the late 70s, early 80s. I got pictures of him when he was a brand new cop in 1947, standing in front of Las Vegas Police Department. I was able to get a belt buckle off of eBay that has Las Vegas Metro PD with his signature on it.
Oh my gosh.
I have a badge that says Moran for Sheriff that I got on eBay. So I used everything I could find to find mementos and information. And also, Find a Grave is a really good tool because I actually went in and added my grandma and grandpa to Find a Grave. So if any other people are searching now, they can see where they are buried.
Mm.
And you can also sometimes find other information. Like I searched for a great grandfather and was able to find other relatives that were buried in the same cemetery in Oklahoma. So if you're like an amateur genealogist and you're really building your tree, that's a really good resource too. Newspapers.com Lily is really good, and you can pay extra for it on Ancestry and just put in a name and it'll give you any news article. I mean, I went back, what, to the 1940s?
Do you think your birth father knew about you, knew you existed?
I don't think so, only because the half brother, when we were still talking, said if he had known about me, that he doesn't believe he would have ignored that, even though he'd been married at the time.
Okay.
Uh, I don't know, Lily. I prefer to think that than to think that, or it's like, I hate to even say it like that, but like, did she just be like, hey, we're really good friends. Will you be my sperm donor? Because my husband's impotent.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I like to believe that he didn't know. And everyone I've talked to said, like, he was the prince of men. He was a teddy bear. He was kind to a fault, which I am. I always had a hard time. My dad that raised me was so violent. I mean, he ripped a guy's ear off with a crowbar. Like,
Oh my
he
God.
was a very violent man, as was his brother.
Oh.
And then my mom being so selfish and narcissistic, it's like, where did I get this big heart and this kindness? Because I'm, like, I've heard you say that I'm a people pleaser. I always have been. I'm
Mhm.
meek. And even though I became a cop and Marine, I still retained my heart and like severely sensitive. And I think, well, maybe that came from him, but I sure wish I could have met him. I mean, I was literally a police officer while he was still sheriff,
Oh wow.
and I would have loved to have met him.
That's amazing you ended up becoming a Marine and a cop, and here he was the sheriff
I know,
of
and
Las.
had been a cop like his whole life, his whole adult life. And my dad, I mean, they both worked in the casinos, and I grew up in Las Vegas. Like, it was just very strange that I would want to do those things.
Thank you so much for sharing all of this. I thought it was great we started today with the importance of a family medical history. I'm so sorry about your most recent diagnosis
Thank
and
you, Lily.
whatever treatment you have coming ahead of you.
Um, I'm scared, Lily, but I'm just going to say this. I don't know if we're still recording, but my bio dad was obviously a warrior. He fought and got battlefield commissions at Guadalcanal. He was a man's man. He was a cop's cop. And I'm a warrior too. And I think I got that from him. And I just keep looking at this little quote I have that says, keep going, warrior. And I'm going to survive this. My doctor's very positive, but I just want people to know there could be something out there that literally could be life or death, that could affect you or your child. And don't stop looking, because if people won't talk to you, get the death certificates, reach out to second cousins, look on newspapers.com, look for obituaries. A lot of times it will have the cause of death, or it will say long battle with cancer, or donate to this particular diabetic fund or something like that. And you can get clues to your medical history that way, even when people will not or refuse to talk to you.
So helpful. What great ideas.
Yes.
If people had questions for you specifically, Caroline, could they reach out to you?
Yes, they can reach out to me on my Instagram, and that is Caroline Moran Earl. So Caroline, Caroline, Moran, Moran, and my last name Earl, Earl. I'm changing my name, Lily. I'm going to go to Moran Earl, because if I can't change my birth certificate, someone's going to know that I was a Moran.
And that was supposed to be your name.
Yes, that should have been my name.
I'll put the link below for your Instagram handle. Thank you for being willing to let people contact you with any questions. And Caroline, thank you so much for sharing this important information about knowing your true medical history and for sharing your story today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Lily, and thank you for all that you do.
These stories are here for us to identify with. If you are an NPE and would like to share your story, email npestories@gmail.com. You do not have to give any identifying information. If you are an NPE and would like to share your story, I'd like to hear from you. Subscribe to this podcast to hear more. Come heal with us.